Hello and welcome back to the American Superbike Show. Please like and follow or subscribe, however it's labeled in your preferred podcasting platform. I'm your host, Stitch Turner, and today we're going to have just, a little short episode catching up on the news that has come out since I last recorded. And just for funsies, we're going to do just a quick rundown of Superbike and Super Sport and, just what we know and what we're still waiting for some answers on. I made a joke last week about how nice it was to have all of the news come out before I recorded an episode, rather than within a few hours after I just published one. Well, that was short-lived, because the universe just laughed at me. Within 3 hours of hitting publish, we got news last week that Cameron Peterson will be returning to Superbike on a Ducati Panigale V4R for wrench motorcycles that will be run in partnership with Warhorse. So that is now 4 Ducatis that have been committed to the grid for 2026 and 5 for 2027. I saw one comment online about how MotoAmerica is turning into a Ducati invitation series, just like World Superbike and MotoGP. I think that kind of thought was pretty short-sighted observation, and I don't even think it's really close to accurate. First, while there really isn't a whole lot of pushback that I can give about the MotoGP aspect of things, but when was the last time a rider on a Ducati won the Superbike World Championship? It wasn't that long ago, but it wasn't last year. It also wasn't the year before that. And for the second reason why I just don't think that's something that's going to happen here is it's something I keep harping on. At least here in the United States of America, we are probably in the prime years of what may be just the second coming of the golden age of Superbike racing. If anything, MotoAmerica has been a bit of a Yamaha invitational in the past, and the team that made it happen was Attack Yamaha. They're still here. They're still winning races, and they should have won the championship last year. BMW did win the title last year, and despite losing the rider that brought that title home, they are still arguably strengthening their factory presence in the United States over the offseason by turning to Orange Cat Racing to run 2 Superbikes in 2026 for Sean Dillon Kelly and Jason Uribe. And hell, even Suzuki has put out a refreshed version of their venerable GSXR 1000 at a time when Richie Escalante keeps making his way closer and closer to the front of the finishing order seemingly every race. My point is, this ain't the old days. Back when you really only had to beat one other manufacturer or team. All of a sudden, this grid is going to be stacked. Good luck to all the teams that are hoping to see results right away. They're going to need it because they have a hell of a task in front of them. Hell, and so making his return to Superbike and having that hell of a task in front of him after a 1-year hiatus in Supersport is going to be Cameron Peterson. If you have any interest in MotoAmerica Superbikes, and you probably already knew that this was happening, as it was one of the worst kept secrets of the paddock. Even on the latest episode of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice, when they were interviewing Matthew Skoltz, they kind of talked about Cam moving back up to Superbikes at the same time as his countrymen, as if it was a done deal. And although they never really did let any of the other details slip out about, the manufacturer of the team or anything. So last year, Peterson rode a Ducati in Supersport. So this is going to be his second year in a row in a Ducati, although last year he did ride the Panigale V2. He rode that to a 5th place finish in the season championship, scoring 8 podiums throughout the year, and he split them up evenly, with 4 of them being 2nd place finishes and 4 of them being 3rds. Over the last few years, if there has been one weakness for Cam Peterson, it has been his injury luck. I can't remember the last time that Cam started every race in a season. However, that was something that did improve in 2025 while riding for the Ducati in Supersport. He only missed 1 race in 2025. So, I hope that kind of trajectory is maintained and the number of races that he misses drops to 0 for 2026, because the South African is legitimately one of the nicest guys that you will meet in the paddock. And because of that, he's one of my wife's favorite riders as well. So I do think that a healthy Cam Peterson will be someone that will challenge for the championship right away on this machine. And that's because I think this package actually has 3 things that all championship contenders need. The first thing you need is a badass fast rider. As long as Cam Peterson is healthy, that box is checked. Another thing you need is a badass fast bike. All the expectations are that this new for 2026 homologation of the Ducati Panigale V4R is also going to check that box. The third thing you need is the people behind the scenes that put everything together. And I think that box is going to be checked as well. When you look back just 2 short years ago, when the MotoAmerica Superbike Championship left the weekend at Brainerd International Raceway, Bobby Fong was on top of the standings. And this is already past the halfway point in the season, and Bobby Fong was not riding for the factory-supported Attack Yamaha at that time. Instead, he was riding a Yamaha R1 that was prepared by the team, by the Wrench Motorsports team that's owned by Jameen Mathis. Interestingly enough, the crew chief on that motorcycle was Robbie Peterson, Cameron's dad. Robbie has a long history of taking some really good fast guys and kind of straightening them out a little bit into really, really good fast guys. Guys like the aforementioned Bobby Fong, but he's also worked with Hayden Gillum, Ty Scott, and J.D. Beach in the past. And now Robbie will get to work with his son, Cam, in 2026 for the first time, as he will once again be leading the technical effort for the Warhorse team. For the Wrench team. In partnership with Warhorse. A little bit of a short side note, but I love racing dads that don't work with their own kids. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it takes a hell of a lot of introspection and self-discipline to realize that your own kid already listens to you all day long and is probably pretty good at tuning you out. That is not the recipe for success when trying to develop at a high level. You always want to do what's best for your kids. And sometimes one of the hardest things to accept is that sometimes the best thing you can do is let someone else take the lead. Bobby Rahal, he also took this same sort of approach when his son Graham got into racing. And I remember hearing this interview that he gave on the Marshall Pruitt podcast. He talked about this subject at length and how he felt it not only made Graham a better racer by getting instruction from someone he was more likely to be open to receiving it from, but also just, making sure that this was something that Graham wanted to do himself rather than it being a case where Bobby was trying to live vicariously through his son. Now, I know some of it's apples and oranges, but I think about this interview often whenever I think about Robbie Peterson, because I just have this feeling that if they were interviewing Robbie Peterson instead of Bobby Rahal, the answers probably would have still been nearly identical, because they're both just striking me as good dads. Let's see here. Just a little quick story, too, about Robbie. Hold on as I cough. So, I at least find this a little bit funny. One of the things I do is I go and I walk around the garages at Daytona every year, and I think it was the Friday before the 200. Now, I'm not really big on autographs, but I do have to admit I like to try and take selfies with people. Not just riders, but, the people in general that I recognize from the MotoAmerica paddock. So, we're walking around the garages, and my wife was with me like always. But, we're walking down the length of the garages, and off to my right, I see Hannah Lopa talking to Robbie Peterson. Now, everyone listening to this podcast should know who Hannah Lopa is, so I don't think I really need to give any sort of introduction there. But every podcast is someone's first and whatnot, so I will just say that Hannah Lopa is the lead pit lane reporter for MotoAmerica's television coverage, and she's not only a former Miss USA contestant, she was Miss New York, but she's a brilliant creative mind. She does a lot of the work behind the scenes on the shows like Pressure to Rise and Generation Speed. Anyways, one of my favorite things to do, as a MotoAmerica fan, is to just say hi to these people. It sounds small and it sounds silly, but treating people like people, it tends to go a long way towards having a pleasant interaction with somebody. Also, I'm pretty sure that I just have a knowledge about who these people are that kind of exceeds the normal fan. The reason why I tell you all this is because I said hi to Hannah, and she just took it in stride and pleasantly said hi back, because she's probably used to these things. But then when I said, "Hi, Mr. Peterson," the look on Robbie's face was priceless. He had this a little bit of an initial reaction of, who the hell is this guy and why does he know my name? Now, I know in the past Robbie was a world-famous motorcycle rider before Cam was born and all that, but I think he's just grown a little bit accustomed to his relative anonymity here in the States. I didn't really have any sort of time to stop and chat, and so I just said hi to him, and just the look on his face was worth more than any sort of conversation we probably could have had. All right, so let's move on. In our news of the week, our next piece of news is about the ride that Cam P had last year. On Tuesday morning, the press releases press releases, if I could speak words, were sent out. And stories went up on MotoAmerica.com that Darren Bender is going to be taking over the Ducati Panigale V2 that Peterson rode for the Celtic HSBK with Warhorse Racing Team. There had been a lot of rumors that Bender was heading somewhere here in the stateside, so it's good just to have it confirmed that the MotoGP veteran is going to help replenish the ranks in Supersport a year after the top couple of riders jump back up the Superbike. When I look at, what we should be able to expect, what would be the front of the grid for 2026, I'm going to be exceedingly curious as to just where are our top prospects for the future. The riders like Ty Scott and Blake Davis, Alessandro Di Mario, and Kayla Yakov, how are they going to stack up against a rider that has been to the top level, albeit not with the strongest program, but he is a rider who's coming straight from the top level of the sport, and he's going to be spending a season here learning a lot of new circuits. It's going to be interesting to see how they all stack up with each other. All right, so that's pretty much the news of the week. I want to take literally just a few minutes and try and look ahead of what we know in regard to the silly season and what we are still waiting for some answers on. Now, I'm not going to try and go through every class. It's just way too early in the off season for that. So today, we're just going to stick what is still, to me, the two highest classes in Supersport and Superbike. Now, I have some friends that, I know it's hard to believe, but I have friends. And they have podcasts about college. They like to podcast about college football, and they have a show that's kind of a heavy part of it is the silly season for head coaches and whatnot. If you like college football at all, I can't recommend enough Split Zone Duo. Plus, if you want to go a lot of college football, but some things outside that, Phantom Island with Ryan Nanny and everyone's favorite curmudgeon, Stephen Godfrey. It's a great show. It focuses on the football aspect a lot, but it also branches out into other areas of the sporting world. So I asked Godfrey if this was okay. He said yes. So I'm borrowing something from them that is called therapy words. They are, I think, I feel, and I know. I think is just like it says. It's something that I think has happened or is happening, but it's mainly based on my gut. It's a hunch. I feel is more than I think. It's more than a hunch because it's a gut feeling with some sort of supporting evidence that, may be circumstantial, but there's some smoke there. And I'm not just coming up with this on my own. And for this exercise for today, we're going to stick with I know is basically means we already have the press release. So let's start with Supersport. This is what we know so far. We have three riders that will be making the jump back up the Superbike and will not be returning, and that's PJ Jacobsen, Cameron Peterson, and the rider that's won the last two championships, and Matthew Skoltz. We do know that Darren Bender will be riding a Ducati Panigale V2 for Celtic HSBK with Warhorse. We also know that Josh Herron, Kayla Yakov, and Alessandro Di Mario will make up a three-bike effort from Ray Hall Ducati Moto. We know that Blake Davis will be returning with Strack Racing. There hasn't been any sort of a press release that I have seen, but it was another thing that was talked about pretty openly by everyone on the last episode of MotoAmerica's own podcast. So I'm taking that as an I know. And that's pretty much all the I knows for Supersport. I kind of feel like Ty Scott returning to Tame Hammer should be an I know, but I can't find anything online confirming it, so it's technically still an I feel. I just don't know how long his previous deal was for, so I'm not even sure if he even needed a new one. The same kind of thing applies for Aiden Sneed on the MV Agusta and MP13. I don't have enough information either way but I feel like it's something that's going to be continuing. I also feel like Josh Hayes is going to be back on a Yamaha R9 for a full season. And I feel like Brandon Posh will return for a full season with sponsorship from Yoritos on a Suzuki. Let's see here. I have one more I feel. Dominic Doyle. I think he'll make the jump up from Twins Cup. Just a whole lot of posts on Instagram over the last couple of months of Doyle spending his off-season time on a Supersport machine. But, we still don't have any sort of confirmation on anything yet, but that's a lot of smoke. But you know what? I should probably also stress that that's fine. We're still in mid-December, so there's still a lot of time to go in the off-season. I don't get truly concerned about whether someone is going to find a ride or not until we start getting to about February. If nothing is confirmed by that date, then I start to be concerned if it's going to happen at all. So let's go to I think. I have only just one, and it's, this is the lowest end of the confidence scale, and it's things that are really nothing more than a hunch or a gut feeling. And the only I think that I have is at this moment is that I think Avery Dreyer will put something together to make his Super Sport debut in 2026. So that's a quick rundown of Super Sport. Now let's do the same exercise for Superbikes, once again starting with the I knows. We know that Cameron Beaubier and Benjamin Smith will be on Warhorse Ducatis. We also know that Cameron Peterson will be on another Ducati run in partnership between Wrench Motorsports and Warhorse, as well as yet another Ducati that will be run by the Ray Hall Ducati Moto with XPEL team for PJ Jacobsen. We also know that there will be a two-bike factory-supported effort for BMW run by the Orange Cat team that will run Sean Dillon Kelly and Jason Uribe. We know that Matthew Skoltz will run a Yamaha R1 for Strack Racing. And we also know that Bobby Fong will have at least one more year on his deal to ride the Attack Yamaha R1. I want to say that we know Jake Gagne will be back next year as well for Attack Yamaha, but he's another one that I just don't really have enough of an idea of whether his previous deal is even up. So we kind of have to put that in the I feel section for now. There's one other rider that I kind of embarrassingly can't really remember if it's an I feel or if it's an I know, and that's Richie Escalante. I want to say that it was already announced that Richie is going to for sure return to the factory-supported Suzuki effort at Team Hammer, but it's kind of vague in my brain, so I'm a little hesitant. I feel like I remember the crew on MotoAmerica's Live Plus talking about this during the COTA weekend, but I also kind of feel like I could be making that all up, so I'm just not sure. And I'm too lazy to just go back and watch the whole weekend of races again to try and see where I've got that comment from. Let's see here. I know JD Beach will be back in Superbike rather than Superbike Cup, but I feel like it will be alongside his friend Hayden Gillum on the Real Steel Honda team. Moving both of those bikes up to a full Superbike spec rather than having one Superbike and one stock 1000. I also feel like that there will be a third Honda once again for Ashton Yates, run by the Southern Honda team. But since I don't really have any sort of press releases in hand, I'm just going to keep all this stuff in the I feel section for now. And let's see here. I also feel I'm going to leave this as I think that Bryce Cornbow will do another year's the Superbike Cup. I keep wanting to say Stock 1000, but that's not technically the name of a standalone race class anymore. I have to remember to keep using Superbike Cup. So Bryce Cornbow, I think he's going to run the full Superbike Cup next year. And now we bring this up, I wonder if, since Bryce has changed his last name from Prince to Cornbow, I wonder if he has any plans to change the name of his racing team as well. I mean, BPR stands for Bryce Prince Racing. And I think it was either right before or maybe it was just after the start of last season that he changed his name. Either way, when the name change did go into effect, it was kind of like a little bit late in the game to just change the team's name, possibly even mid-season. I don't think MotoAmerica has any sort of rules against that, although I know at some levels of racing there can be a point on the calendar that once you reach it, you're not allowed to make any sort of those changes. Either way, even if it was allowed by the rules or not, I would understand, leaving something like that to the off season, because I am sure that there would be a lot of ancillary dominoes that would then have to be addressed once a change like that is made. And it's probably just best to wait until the off season to do that, if at all. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Bryce likes things the way they are, and so no change is needed. So that's 8 confirmed rides for MotoAmerica Superbike before we've even made it to Christmas. 8 fully confirmed. And you throw in 4 more solid I feels, and having this much of the paddock set in the top class this relatively early in the off season is sort of like its own little Christmas miracle. Especially when you add in Super Sport that we also already have 5 more I knows to go with 5 more I feels. Anyway, we still have a long way to go for the series on the whole, as a series, but I'm thankful to have these little reminders sometimes of just all the baby steps that have already been made for so long to get us to this point, just as I am thankful to have the listeners that I do like you. I'm going to take at least 1 week off for the holidays. Unless something big happens over the next couple weeks, which I do not anticipate, I would not I'm not planning on recording another episode until after the new year. So, however you will be spending the holidays, I hope you enjoy some time with your friends and family that you love. Here's to a happy and healthy 2026, and when we come back, we can start counting down the days to Daytona. So long, everybody.